John, thank you for being on the show, man. I am a big fan. I've been following you since like 2015, 2016. First time I had the opportunity to actually see you speak in person was at a sales development training event that we had in Palo Alto at Andreessen Horowitz, and I was one of the
Hi.
portfolio managers. And dude, you hit me right away with all your good knowledge. So thank you for being on here. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Derek. Actually, there's a funny quick story on that one, real quick.
Yeah.
So this is how ignorant I am of like the big world of finance and that type of stuff. So I was at Dreamforce, right? And previously, I'd been asked, "Hey, could you come down and speak to our portfolios?" Right? And I get, asked it, and it was for free. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be in San Francisco anyways, and Palo Alto, but it was A16Z.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
I had no idea. I
What that
honestly, I had
was.
no idea who A16Z was, right? So I'm like, whatever. So I'm with my boy Chris, who's with me, right? He's now works as my chief growth officer, and I had to bail out of Dreamforce for the afternoon. He's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm going to somewhere in Silicon Valley, like doing this little speech for a group of portfolios." He's like, "Well, what's the VC?" I was like, "I don't know, something like A16Z, something, I don't know, something like that." And he stops. He goes, are you fucking kidding me? He's like, you're going to Andreessen Horowitz and speaking to their port. He's like, do you realize who's walked through those doors and how much money you? And I'm like, huh? And honestly, I was so ignorant of how big Andreessen Horowitz was that I just kind of rolled in there, and like he made me a little nervous. I'm like, oh shit, and because I wasn't dressed good, you know what I mean? I was just like, I'm just showing up to do a favor for somebody. So, anyways, it was just my lack of
It's all
knowledge
good,
of
man.
the
It
world.
was it was fire. I was one of the managers. I brought my team in there, and everybody walked away with some goodness. Why you? Why you now?
Yeah,
NLP. You
yeah.
dropped all the good stuff. So I want to learn a little bit about your practice to start out with, if we could. As you know, the name of the pod here is the Sales Consultant. And a lot of folks tuning in are going to be consultants, trainers themselves, and or trying to transition. So can
Yep.
you tell me what triggers or what point typically does a client bring in a professional sales trainer like yourself?
Yeah, so we're kind of, it's an interesting, we're trainers, period, right? So there's consultants and there's trainers. I always say we are trainers, not consultants. Trainers are kind of like the grandparents, right? They come in, play with the kids, and they leave, right? And the managers are the parents
Parents.
that have to make
Yeah.
sure that it sticks. Now, consultants, you kind of have to get into that parent role, right? Because like they're looking for a little bit longer term agreement.
Maybe
But for
uncles,
us,
aunts. Yeah.
yeah, for us, you got to have a structure in place. We do not build your sales organization. We do not, put together a huge playbook for you or come up with your go to market strategy. But
Right.
once you have a team kind of set, right, and it doesn't have to be huge, but it's almost like this middle ground of the growth phase. We don't really work well with huge enterprises, and we don't work well with very very small as far as the corporate side of the house of what we do. But we got two main programs. One's called Filling the Funnel, and the other's called Driving to Close. Filling the funnel is all about getting meetings, so prospecting. Driving to close is all about negotiations, objection handling, closing, and all that stuff. And so we have kind of this 1-2 punch that covers the full gamut of the sales process. And the reason I was attracted to this in the first place when I took it was because it wasn't necessarily a methodology. People are like, oh, I go, Sandler or Miller Hyman, these methodologies. I remember growing up in sales and when I was 23 years old, looking at all, starting my first company, not knowing anything about sales. Took every training I could. And I remember thinking like, okay, these methodologies, they figured it out, right? So they must have this. I'm going to buy into the whole stuff, hook, line, and sinker. But then I would walk out of these trainings going, well, some of that was good, but like most of it was pretty shit. So what I started doing was taking pieces out of all the different methodologies. And then when I came across the original company called Basho, which was the training that Jeff Hoffman, who's the original
Right.
founder of that, I sat through that training and it was like a light bulb went off because it wasn't a methodology. It was tactics. It was technique driven, and it worked, and it was super immediately applicable. There wasn't role play involved. It was like, hey, here's how to send an email. Now send an email. Let's open up your laptop, go on a website, research this, send it this way. Here's how to make a cold call. We're going to make a cold call in class with that approach. And it just, for me, it just hit because I'm a very keep it simple, stupid guy. Like the reason I don't like books, for instance, and I wrote a children's book that's behind you, thank you very much
Yeah,
again,
yeah, of course.
is because I think most books are full of fluff,
Mm.
right? there's usually one or two really good concepts in there that you can pull back from. But then then they have to fill the book with 200 some odd pages so they can charge $24.95. I'd much rather I'd pay $24.95 if you gave me just the two nuggets and made it so I didn't have to read the whole stupid book.
Right.
With trainings, I
Yep.
sit there in a training. I
Mm.
spend 8 hours in a training, listen to some dipshit like me talk, and I walk away thinking, oh, there's something I can put in the subject line. Well, at least I got something out of this. I would have rather had the person just stand up and be like, hey, here's to put in the subject line. Go get 7 hours and 7.5 hours of your time back. And I'd probably
That could have been an email. Yeah.
So
Mm.
for me, that get to the point was really resonated. And so
Mm.
that's what we really try to do. Our content and our training doesn't really conflict with a lot of other, it actually supports it because it is very technique driven and structure oriented, not script oriented. And so companies bring us in. Probably the most finite way to put this is when they're at their inflection point. When I say inflection point, a lot of companies will grow pretty rapidly, right? Through inbound lead generation or marketing. And then they kind of level off a little bit. And when they level off, one of two things happens. They either have to move from the seed and grow approach to the top down, right? So now they have to go enterprise down, or AEs who have had like 100% of their book given to them by marketing and SDRs. Now they have to self-source like 20, 30% of their book, right? When that inflection point happens, this training hits a home run, right? But it's not for like super complex sales or any of that stuff, even though our prospecting stuff is universal. I think our prospecting stuff's the best in the business.
Got it. What do you think blocks your clients in some engagements from getting the full value of what you and your team bring to the engagement?
We're in a weird spot because we're right in the middle, in the sense that we're not big enough, or we don't charge enough, right? Our ACV is 20, 30 grand, right? So usually when you get
Thanks
into
for sharing
engagement,
that.
it's $20,000, which is a decent amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like Miller Hyman. It's not like Taz where you're dropping $500,000, $2 million. Like when you're dropping $500,000 on training, you have buy-in from the top all the way down, and you're going to measure the hell out of that and drive it, right? So you're almost forced as far as the adoption is concerned, just because purely how much money you're spending. Now, on the other side of the equation, we're not like a Sandler that is charging, $250 an hour, $2,500, and that's kind of like throw it on your credit card, see you later. So who cares? I'm going to give that to my reps. We're right in the middle there. So it's funny, we get in conversations where we're expensive enough for the executive to feel like they're investing in their team, but not expensive enough for them to care about the long-term application of it. And it's funny because I get in a lot of conversations with executives and they talk about ROI. Well, what's the ROI or your training and da. I'm like, give me a break with this ROI fucking conversation. I go, all right, here, let me ask, what are your current conversion ratios to your tier one accounts, VPs of sales of the main persona using an email cadence? What's that conversion ratio right there? And they'll be like, I don't know. Okay, so what's your conversion ratio from stage 1 to stage 2? And I'll kind of dissect it, and eventually I'll stop and I'll say, like, can we just be honest here? How much of this is that you just want to show your team you're investing in them, versus measuring any real direct KPI or something like that? And a lot of it will just kind of be like, yeah, this is okay. So can we stop with this? Now, if you want to do this right, I am all in with you, right? But the biggest thing is the adoption of it is really predicated on on whether or not somebody internally can take the training and own it. Okay.
Yeah.
I start all my trainings off like this: 10, 60, 30. Okay. When I was doing a training one time, there's like 400 people in front of me, and did a Q&A afterwards. And one of the kids say, hey, John, I looked at your logo list, man. Like, you train all of our competitors. So if you're going to train us all on the exact same stuff, how do we differentiate? And I said 10, 60, 30. I said 10% of you in this room are going to take what I tell you and execute and run it, because that's, at the highest level, because that's the type of people you are. 60% of you are going to do something different because it's easy and it makes sense. 30% of you ain't going to do shit different. So the question isn't how many people can I train? The question is what percentage do you want to be in? And so left to their own accord, sales reps, 10, 60, 30. I mean, you know it. You've been in a class before. The people who sit in the front of the room and are asking questions, the people who are on Zoom and have their video on and are actually engaged.
Stay after class, come up to you and ask you for clarification.
I promise you, those are the top 10% of that sales team. Promise you.
Yep.
The ones who are on their video, but maybe not engaged, those are probably in the 60%. And the people who don't have their video on, those are part of the 30%, right? And so without somebody internally who can take the training and own it and implement it and manage it, it is what it is, just like every other training. But
Shot
man,
in the
if you have
arm.
somebody
Yeah.
internally who
Mhm.
owns it, you can do some special things. And so that's what we look for. We look for somebody who can take the training, like enablement or whoever that is going to take it, and I will work with them directly afterwards to say, okay, here's how to implement this, here's how to coach towards this, and everything else. But I'm not going to get into, because they'll also ask me, so what's your reinforcement plan? And my
Right.
direct answer to a manager when they ask me, or an executive when they ask me what your reinforcement plan is, where are your managers going to be in the training? Are they going to be?
This is why I asked the question, quite frankly, because it's a
Yep.
frontline management.
It's a frontline manager thing. That the shame of sales training is, look, we're undereducated as sales professionals in general,
Fair.
but sales managers are insanely undereducated on how to actually be a real good manager and a coach. And
Yeah, it's neglected.
there's
I was
such a
having this
gap.
conversation with Hillman Sore recently. You might know him, Coach CRM, but he was mentioning this, and we were talking about how frontline managers are somewhat on an island in some
Yep.
cases, and they're not only they're not well educated, because most of them come up within the ranks. I did.
Yep.
It's the resource enablement. We focus so much on the IC and not enough on that middle manager and getting them those skills that they need, because it's completely different, as you know, from selling.
We also promote the wrong ones into management. We promote the best reps. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, the best rep is not going to be the best manager,
Right.
because the best rep is usually what I would consider the artist, in the sense that they're just good at what they do. They have strong work ethic. They know where to invest their time, all that stuff. And they can't really articulate it or put a structure to it to teach it to other people.
Well said.
Right? Because they are the best rep, we say, okay, cool. Here, you're the manager now. Teach everybody else to do what you do. And they get up there and they're like, what do you mean do what I do? Like, this is what I do. Like, just do it. I'd rather have the B+ rep, the rep who can come to me and say, like, usually the A rep will hit their number, but they really won't be able to tell you how they hit their number. They just do, because they know how to do it. The B+ rep who can come to me and say why they did or did not hit their number and break it down for me. So, hey, John, all right, so here's the deal. I've been looking at my territory, and I did this many activities, and conversion ratios were here. And look, where I fell down the most was when I got to this stage. So this is where I need some help, because next time, if I get more of this, I think I'll be able to hit. Like, if you can walk through your process, a process, I can teach a process. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I can't teach you how to be, you know what I mean? Like, I can't
teach you
work
swagger.
ethic.
I can't teach you confidence. I can't. Yeah.
I can't teach that stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So but I can teach process. I can teach structure. And so I want the kid who is the B+ rep to be my manager, because they won't need as much investment, because they know they're a science-oriented driven person, whereas the A rep will need some training on how to be a manager, because they can't articulate what they do to everybody else.
Fair. I want to talk to you about practicing some of the lessons that come out of your trainings as well, right? I think that's part of the thing that blocks us from getting value as well, is not actually putting this stuff into practice. So this morning you posted about the importance of practicing on certain types of accounts. Something I try and drive home as often as possible, try and facilitate role playing as often as possible.
Yep.
I think you're taking it beyond role playing. What is your approach or your thought process on why reps don't practice enough, and how can leaders help get them to practice more often?
Yeah, we don't allow failure in sales. We don't give them room to try things. We practice on the fly. You know what I mean? Like, this is literally the only profession that we go through boot camp and then go in and have to do our job. I mean, think about a basketball player, right? Being like, all right, you got 30 days where you're going to learn how to play basketball, and then I'm going to put you on the court with Kobe, and you know what I mean, or whatever,
Steph or whatever.
LeBron, yeah. It's like, what the fuck, right? So you got to go through the JV league. You got to go through the, you know what I mean, and you got to go on the courts outside and figure that stuff out. But you need to do it, in my opinion, in a real world scenario.
Okay.
I personally don't like role playing. I just don't. Because, and the reason I don't like role playing is because I think it's done wrong for the most part. It's usually this insanely, it's either the most ridiculous scenario you've ever seen, which would probably never happen, or like the perfect scenario. And the trainer doing the role play is usually doing it because they're so fucking good at it. And it looks beautiful when they do it. It's like, oh my God, look at how great they are. But it's because they've done it a billion times before. And the reality of you being able to do that in a real world scenario is not high. Where role playing, I think, has an impact is right before you're about to do the thing. So for instance, if you're about to have a cold call blitz, yeah, right before that cold call blitz, let's do some role playing, just to get the juices going here. You know what I mean? And get the flow down. But then practice, but consciously practice. And this is where, when I said what we do is we coach clients to break their accounts, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1s, those are the top 25. Those are the ones you follow on social. You're super customized with your approach to. You make sure you got your shit together when you make those calls. Tier 2s, those are, you can do volume, right? You can be direct, maybe persona driven, that type of stuff, but they're still decent accounts. Tier 3s are the kind of crappy accounts. Now, I used to throw away crappy accounts. I used to be like, get away from me. You're bad.
Why would I even waste my time?
I don't even want to. Now I absolutely love them, because now anytime I'm trying something new, I rip a list of my tier 3s and I throw up all over myself. Who cares? As long as I'm not saying anything offensive, I can kind of get to wherever I want to do. And a perfect example is pricing. A lot of reps have a challenge when talking about pricing because they're just not confident in talking about pricing.
Right.
So if you're not confident talking about pricing, the last thing you want to do is get in a conversation with a great prospect and deliver pricing like when they ask you and they say, well, how much is this? And you're like, well, it's it's 10 grand, but it really depends on what right. By the way, as soon as you say $10,000, but it really depends on, it's no.
All I heard it was 10,000, and then it's discounted. Got you.
It's no longer discount. It's no like at me as the buyer.
You took away all the value of 10,000. You just dropped it. Yeah.
Well, and by the way, like if I'm a prospect of yours and you tell me 10,000, but I might have been talking to your competitors and I heard 20 grand, I heard 15 grand, I heard 30, and then you said 10, and I was like, good Lord, like that actually is reasonable. But as soon as the word "but" comes out of your mouth, I ain't paying 10 grand on that. You just gave me a discount before I even asked for it. What's going to happen if I ask for it? I could tell you.
Notes, people, take those notes. He's giving game away.
Right. So what I want to do is I want to rip a list of my tier 3 accounts, actually get into deals with them. And when the pricing conversation comes up, I'm going to practice shutting the hell up after I say $10,000. So if Derek, you're like, hey, John, all right, this looks decent, man, and whatever. So how much are we talking here? $10,000. And I'm just going to shut the hell up and be as awkward as all get up to see how that feels and see how you react.
Right. First
because
one to
guess
speak
what? You're going
loses,
to grab confidence.
Losing isn't the right word, but the first one to speak.
Exactly.
That
and guess what? There might be you might be like, all right, John, send me over the contract. Guess what happens to my confidence when that happens? It goes through the roof, right?
Now I might be ready for those B's if I do that 10 times.
Right. Or you object. And guess what we're going to practice there, Derek? Objection techniques.
Yeah.
So, Derek, help me understand here. $10,000 you say is too expensive, but you told me that earlier you missed your quota by 20% last year, and your ACV is $50,000, and your target was 10 million. So, back in napkin math here, man, that's like I don't know, I'm making up numbers here, but like that's like a $500,000 problem. Like that's like $1 million problem. And am I missing something? Like how? Because what I tell people when I tell them my price. That's why, to me, like the nuanced things of what you get in the sales process are going to help you with objection handling, because I sell to people who have ACVs of around my size, $20,000, $30,000. Because if I sell you, if you got $500, if your ACV is $500, it's going to be hard for me to justify you spending 20, 30 grand on training. Right. But if your ACV is 20, 30, 40, 50 G's, we are not having a conversation about pricing, Derek, because I'm going to say, wait, 50,000. So please look, let's stop talking about price here. It's not that we're too expensive. You just don't believe that my solution can solve your problem. That's what we're talking about here. Because you have $1 million problem. I'm telling you, I got a $10,000 solution for you. And so don't tell me I'm too expensive. Tell me you don't believe that I can do it. And that takes practice, though. That confidence practice, to be able to say that to somebody and be okay with them bailing on you and saying, piss off, I'm out of here. We all need to find that line between being direct and being rude. All of us. And guess what? You have to go over that line to figure out where it is. You know what I mean?
I do,
But you want to
100%.
get to be as direct as possible in the sales process without being rude. And that takes practice. That takes crossing that line. That takes getting a few people pissed off so you can kind of say, okay, here's where it is and here's my style. And once you practice down there, and then you start moving up, and because your confidence will grow and it'll get bigger and it'll get bigger. But
Right.
that's why I like practicing and being conscious of it, not just doing it haphazardly throughout the week because, we book time. This is going to be our tier 3 time. We're going to call into shitty accounts. We're going to, get shitty deals in our pipeline. We're going to do these things this week, that type of stuff.
So in terms of operationalizing that, if someone was onboarding and you had a program, you would pull from that bucket for the new
Oh,
hire and make sure they have a
absolutely.
period of time to call on these tier 3s or these, whether they're accounts or old dormant leads that, we don't really care if they
Yep.
convert or not, same thing, right?
Yep.
But then on an ongoing basis, when you have someone who's struggling and they need to practice certain areas of their game, whether it's opening the call or so forth, same
Yep.
thing. Let's
Same
bring
thing.
back that tier 3, bring back those old leads, and let's
Yep.
get to practicing. And I know you said you're not a big fan of role playing, but it sounds like there is a place somewhere
There's a
in
place.
that process for
Absolutely.
role playing. If it's
Like right before
structured
a deal.
appropriately, though, that's the thing, right? Like we don't want to make it too easy. What do you think about using internal personas, right? If I'm selling
Yep.
legal software or finance software, wouldn't I bring in my GC, my general counsel? Wouldn't I bring in my CFO to do that role play with me?
That'd be cool. That would be helpful. Again, I'd make it actionable. So afterwards they're applying it. I think it's great so you bring up a great point. I don't think clients leverage their internal resources nearly as much as they should. I remember a while back, my reps would come to me like, John, I'm having a really hard time getting through gatekeepers, and, any advice. And I'd be like, hold on a second. Hey, Shelly. Yeah, John. Shelly, are you a gatekeeper? Yeah, John. Shelly, do you get a bunch of calls from sales reps all day long trying to get through to me? Yeah. Do you let some through and others not? Yeah. Do you mind talking to one of my reps here about how to get through a gatekeeper? Like, sure. So there's one thing about knowledge, and then there's another thing about role play. I personally lean a little bit more on the knowledge side from those personas because I want to be educated. I want to talk, like Derek, if you're a CRO, right, in my company, I want to hear from you. What do CROs really care about, Derek? Like, what's a day in the life look like in a CRO, in your world? So I can have some empathy for you. So I actually can put a face to a name when I'm talking, because I call it the give a shit factor, where I play is between the give a shit factor and unconscious competence. That's where I play. I cannot get you to give a shit. That's on you. Okay. But once you care, once you are interested in learning, once you care about continuous improvement, once you're genuinely curious about being better, I will give you every tip, tool, and technique you can possibly imagine. Because those tips and tools and techniques, you need them when you start because you don't know what you don't know. So you need some structure, you need some stuff to get you moving in the right direction. But eventually, all sales professionals, after they do it enough, and if they're really working on their craft, they do rise to that unconscious competence level. And that's when you don't need any of the techniques. That's when you don't need any, because it's just part of you. Like I train a ton of stuff that I don't technically use in a structured format, but I use because if you were paying attention, you'd watch how I would use it just in a much more smooth way because it's just internalized because I've done it so often in my career. So I think that's where, that's role, that's techniques, but that's an application. So it's not just like this, I'm studying. It's like, you study for a test, you take the test and you never think about it again. You know what I mean? Like that's like role play. It's like, all right, I'm going to do my role play. It's going to be awkward. My boss is going to want me to do it. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to go make sure I, do what my boss says. And then whatever, I got to get back to my
I'm making on calls and do whatever I do.
Right. But if you tie it to, like, for instance, forecast reviews are good, but most managers look at the numbers. Where are we on this deal? What do we need to go this one forward? Right. It's not a coaching. I think forecast reviews are the best place to do coaching because you could say, okay, well, look at this deal. All right. Where are we on this one? Well, Okay, cool. Well, what's your next action item with them? I got a meeting next at the end of the week. Okay. What's our goal for that meeting? What are we going to try to get in that meeting that'll make us feel good that we're moving in the right direction? Strategize around. Maybe it's a meeting with power. Maybe it's whatever, that type of thing. Okay, cool. Let's role play that out, Derek. I'm going to be your main point of contact. I am not power. I am not the decision maker. You are going to try to get to my boss. This is for this meeting that you have coming up on Thursday. Let's run this through. And now you're going to be like, hey, John, how's it going? It was great to be. So, John, can I talk to your boss? You know, and you're going to come with some dumbass like, hey, can I talk to your boss? And I'm going to say, piss off, right?
Who
And
other
then
than
you're
yourself?
right. And then you're going to have to handle that objection.
Right, right.
Right. And then we're going to chop it up a little bit. So then when you go into that scenario, you've at least stretched out a little bit,
For sure.
and you might have a clue of how this is going to go. Right. And you'll be
Right.
prepared for it.
It's
So
like watching
that's what I
film
think.
for an upcoming game. You use the basketball analogy, and if we know we're playing LeBron, then we're watching LeBron's tape and we're preparing for his post move down on the block or whatever that specific thing is. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Good.
know it, right? So I've seen this before, right? All right, cool. So
Perfect.
that's where I think role playing has a real big impact. But I personally am all about live application. I think that's where people learn.
Hands-on. Cool. Yeah, I think we'll definitely take that. I think I've been leaning towards the role play a lot and in my coaching. I think definitely taking your advice, and we're going to get some live stuff that they can get out there and practice on before practicing on the good prospects. And that's what you don't want to be doing. Switching gears with you a little bit, back to your practice. We talked about getting value and what an engagement looks like, and it doesn't always go optimally. Sometimes things go left. Have you ever had to fire a client? And if you can share anything, what happened, maybe a story around it, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, a couple of them.
Oh,
I actually have fired a lot of clients in the past. I'm going to go early in my career for the company that I started, and then I'll come to a couple of recent ones. But early in my career, this is where when you're starting, and this is actually good for consultants.
right.
When you're starting off as a consultant, like, hey, you take the leap. Okay. There is a tendency in my opinion, you need at least 6 months runway of money in the bank before you want to go off on your own, give or take. Okay.
Yep.
Because if you don't, what happens is you chase bad money. You take money from anybody who will give it to you. Right. And it's not really your perfect ICP or really where you add the most value, but you'll take on anything. So that's what we did when I first started my first company. We did outsourced IT services, and we would literally take anybody who had computer problems, right? Like, give us, 10 hours, you want to, hourly rate stuff, fine, no problem. But what our goal was recurring revenue, right? So we needed people on a recurring revenue platform that would pay us $3,000 a month, whatever. Right. So we would get these clients, but what it would do is distract us from really getting the clients that were going to truly build our business. And then what happened eventually, unfortunately, is we got to a point where we had enough of those clients that we had to then go back to these clients and fire them. Basically, we had to come to them and say, hey, thanks so much for helping us get here. Here's a new package. I know it's 10 times more than you've ever spent before with us, but this is our new plan. And if you don't go on this plan, we can't support you anymore. And that's not a fun conversation. There could be like, dude, we were here from you at the start. And it's like, oh shit. Yeah, but it just doesn't fit our model. So you actually, even though you're paying the bills with bad money, you're actually retarding your growth in a lot of ways, because you're not focusing on what you should focus on. So first and foremost, you need to make sure you go for the right revenue, the right clients. Okay. Now, fast forward to where I am today. I fired a couple of clients. One for values-oriented stuff because of how they treated my employees. They were, a couple of clients like VPs of sales, big brain, look at me, rah, rah, rah. And I have all my trainers are women. And they would treat them poorly. Wow. And want to talk to me because I'm John.
Kudos to you for that.
Like, hey, what's up, dude? Like da da da. And I would talk to my team, and I'd say, and they'd be like, so how's it going with XYZ? And they'd be like, well, they're okay, And even clients who were like spending good money with us, and I, when I hear they're okay, well, what's going on? And I dig into it, and I find out the VP of sales or some reps on the team are abrasive and talk down to her and that type of stuff. And I've called the VP of sales and say, like, hey, I know we have another couple of sessions coming up here. We're good. I'm going to give you your money back. And I actually don't want to do business with you anymore. And they'd be like, what the fuck, man? They're like, things are going good. I go, no. You treat my employees like shit, and the customer's not always right. Anybody who thinks the customer's always right is full of shit. Right. Your employees. Invest in your employees and your customers will be fine. Okay. But if you take bad customers, just because it's just like having an A player on your team. If you have an A player who's making it rain, okay, but is a raging asshole and toxic to the team environment, unfortunately, most companies are chicken shit to fire that kid. I'll fire that kid in a heartbeat. I will fire that kid in a heartbeat. I will jump back in myself to do revenue shit before I take some asshole who's going to ruin my culture, right? So I fired clients for values purposes. I've also fired clients because we just didn't enjoy working with them, because there's something, and you know this, there's, when you take money from people to do a job, great, right? That's money, and you do the job. But if you don't think you're making a difference, that money doesn't really fill the gap, if you will. So a lot of times, and we talked about this before, where if we do trainings, for instance, and there's one client, I'm not going to say their name, but they're a rather big one. For years, it was great, but recently, over the past 3 or 4 years, it hasn't been fun, because with COVID, again, the lack of caring. When we do a training now remotely, you got 30 people on, 5 are on video. The managers aren't engaged. They don't take advantage of the follow-up sessions that we pre-book. The managers don't do the prep work. So you're sitting there staring at 3 to 4 reps, knowing that the other 25, 30 are not paying attention, knowing that the managers are not going to be reinforcing this. And it's disheartening. It's not enjoyable. There's no much, how much money you're giving me. Like, it's not fulfilling. And so we like making a difference. And when we could tell that we're not making a difference, we self-select out. So there's been clients where I've had to have the conversation with the executive team after that. Like, so usually what'll happen is I'll sell the VP, and then it'll get delegated down to whoever else. And the VP tends to go away and let the training run. And at a certain point, I'll reach out to the VP and be like, look, I know we have these sessions coming up here. I got to be honest with you. Like, by the way, never say that. Sorry. I need to be direct with you. We don't enjoy working with your team. There's an apathy here that I can't get through. You less than 2 to 5 reps every time or actually seem to give a shit. And it doesn't look like your managers are going to do anything with this. So look, we'll take your money if you really want me to, but it's just not working for us. We don't enjoy working with you because we know we're not making the difference that we could. And then the VP gets all hot and bothered and maybe goes and yells at some people or whatever it is. But there's been times like, one of our bigger clients came to us and said, sorry, John, we're going to have to cancel our contract with you. And I was thrilled. Yeah. And by the way, this was one of those clients that helped me build my company, that literally helped me build my company.
Important
and they came and
lessons.
And they said, John, we've, and it was funny because like we were quote unquote catching up. And all of a sudden I get on a Zoom call and there's this person I've never seen before in my life, right, on the Zoom. And she's a product manager. This felt like HR 1,000%. I'm like, am I getting fired? I even said that. I was like, nice to meet you. She's like, yeah, I'm the program manager here. And, I'm pretty new to the team. I go, am I getting fired? And she's like, oh, well, and then the other guy comes on and he's like, hey, John, right? I'm like, and he's like, well, we got some tough news for you here, man. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, well, we've decided to sign this huge contract with this massive vendor, blah, blah, blah. And we have to kind of stop our contract with all other vendors and we have to go all in with them. So we're going to have to, cancel our moving forward. And I was like, all right, cool. I was like, do you need anything from me? And he goes, and you could tell he was like waiting for me to be like, no, man, come on, and negotiate and all that.
What can I do? What can I do?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, cool. So do you need anything from me? And he was like, what? And I said to him, I said, can I be very direct with you? I go, for the past 3 years, we have not enjoyed working with your organization because your reps don't care. Your managers never show up. And we know it's not making the difference that it can. My trainers get demoralized every time they train your team. So whoever you've gone with, I hope you can fix that problem of the lack of caring, because I don't care what you spend. If your reps don't care, it ain't going to work. And so thank you for firing us. I appreciate it. You actually fixed the problem for me because I was trying to figure out how to come to you, because this wasn't one that it was like, oh, a small client, fuck off. Like this was like a big boy, you know what I mean? And I was thrilled that now, did they get me to where I am today? Absolutely. So do I have all love and respect for them? And will I ever talk shit about them? Absolutely not. But everything has a cycle.
Right. Right.
right? We all have seasons. We all go through things, and that's like, you have to understand as a consultant, you also have to understand your lifetime value of that client. For us, as long as you're growing, we probably have about a 2 to 3 year life cycle with you, as long as you're growing, right? Because we can train new hires and that type of stuff. But if you're not growing, probably a year, we'll get in and we'll get out, and we have to bake that into our approach.
Well, thank you for that. I think those are tremendous lessons for anybody who's looking to transition, or anybody who's been doing this for a while, or has clients like that they're facing. That's real life situations that are hard to navigate. So I hope you guys were writing those lessons down. John, I want to ask you about coaching and feedback, and it kind of ties into what you were talking about now, being direct and that sort of thing. I'm going to load this up a little bit, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Accountability, I think, is in some cases under attack. It's hard to have conversations with folks that are underperforming. Managers are struggling to navigate these conversations. We have HR business partners coming in at the top, making sure that, and scrutinizing our conversations, making sure that we're really mindful of this approach. Moreover than, more than ever, with 2023 potential recession on the, coming up, we need to be as productive as possible. You had some comments about unproductive folks and how that affects the business. Mark Benioff, Salesforce, I'm sorry, was in the news recently, and some of the comments that he had in an all hands meeting leaked, and it had to do with people being unproductive and so forth. So can you talk to me about how maybe leaders or managers can go about giving feedback to folks that maybe aren't as productive as they should be? Because that's our job, right? As managers and leaders, is to kind of help coach people up and work them back to that B+ player that you mentioned earlier. So talk to me about how you deliver coaching and feedback with your team, and what that approach might be if you were running a SaaS team of your own.
Yeah, so it's consistent and it's objective as much as possible. I always say, if you are in a performance review, if anything you're about to tell a rep in a performance review is a surprise, then you're a shitty manager. If a rep walks in not knowing what you're going to talk to them about and their strengths and weaknesses and all that, and you lay the hammer on them when they thought that they were doing okay, then you're a jackass manager. You're a terrible manager.
Totally agree.
So you need to be early and often with feedback, and you need to be objective with it. So you need to set the right expectations. Like, what are you tracking? What do you measure? What do you want them to do? And by the way, now the why is more important than ever. We used to, and I had a interesting talk track on this one, as far as how we need to evolve as leaders and managers. And the analogy I use right now, unfortunately, is my favorite team of all time, the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick, and I will fight anybody on this, is the greatest coach of all time up until recently. His style, do your job. It basically, run the system. Shut up. Don't ask any questions. Do what I tell you to do. And for 20 years, even though, with Tom Brady there, he was able to get away with that. Okay. But now we're in a different world. Okay. The kids coming into, like, now college players can get, paid for their persona. So they come into the league as their brand. And that's how they're thinking about it. I mean, the average tenure of an NFL player is 3.3 years, not for long. So they walk into this like as a brand. And so it's no longer do what I tell you to do. They're going to question what you're telling them to do. Why are we doing this? How, right? And Belichick can't adjust to that. He can't, he hates people questioning his ability. So that's why he's ruined Mac Jones. That's why he's, brought in Matt Patricia, because Matt Patricia is basically just a yes man to him. And the game has passed him by, in my humble opinion. Okay. Because these players do not respond to that. It's the same thing in our world. Right. These kids coming out of school, they're not like when I was coming out of school, it was do your fucking job.
Do your job.
I tell you to put your head down, earn it, and then we'll tell you when you get promoted, type of thing. You know what I mean? That's not the case anymore. That, like, we have to evolve as leaders. We have to be more empathetic. We have to give them a better understanding of why we're doing why we're asking them to do these things. So if we start with the why, right? And maybe backing it, like most managers make 50 dials, right? Shut up, make 50 dials. Well, here, if I would explain to you, hey, Derek, The reason I want you to make 50 dials is because we've actually run the numbers at a macro level. And if you make 50, typically the conversion ratios are this and that, and therefore you're going to get paid more. And by the way, if you do that and we track it this way, I'm going to be able to figure out where the gaps are and coach you on very specific things. That's why I need you to make 50 dials. Oh, okay. I'll make 50 dials. You know what I mean? Like I'll figure that out. So I think it's setting clear expectations of what people are being held accountable for.
Okay.
And then being extremely transparent with how you're tracking it. And from an accountability standpoint, and by the way, my biggest weakness is accountability. For me personally, I will get into a forecast review all day long, Derek, and I'll be like, we'll get strategy and all that other stuff. But when you miss your forecast, oh fuck. I don't want to have
the
this
hardest part of the job.
Like, I just don't want to have this conversation. Like I've never put somebody on PIP because I don't even like, I'm like, ugh, like I don't even want to have this.
But that's what I mean is exactly that. That's why
Right.
accountability, I feel like it's so hard to have that conversation a lot of times, even if you have been clear and transparent and they're still underperforming. It's like, hey,
it's
we've been talking about this.
I think it's one of those things where if you put the dashboard up there and every week that person's at the bottom of the dashboard and you've done your coaching and they're not adapting, it's almost a self-select. Like I think you get to a point where you're like, okay. Like obviously this isn't working right now. The way that we coach, and this is something I learned from Jack Welch, because I worked for Jack Welch for a couple of months with his online MBA program, and a lot of people give him a lot of shit for his top grading and everything else, but he wasn't as draconian as people thought. Always fire your bottom 10%. But the way that you manage is your A's, B's, and C's. Okay, you got your A reps, your B reps, and your C reps. And you had said earlier, you want to coach your Bs to be A's, right? You got to pretty much assume that your A's are rented space because they're either going to go somewhere else to make more money or they're going to be a manager or something like that. So you got to almost treat them as rented space. And what you do with your A's is you basically set longer term goals and you let them set the outcome. So it's like, hey, Derek, if you were one of my A reps, I'd be like, all right, Derek, say you hit your target this year. Outside of the revenue, all that, it's like, what are you going for, man? Like what would be special to you if you hit your number like 120% of quota? And you'd be like, oh man, I'd love to drive a Ferrari. I'd love to get an extra week off or whatever it is. And I'll let you determine that. Okay. And then I'll let you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to over communicate with you. I'm going to be like, hey, Derek, this is what's going on, but I'm not going to micromanage you in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to, hey, we good? We good? You good? All right. Need anything from me? Cool. You B players, you want to be a little bit more short-term with. You want to collaborate on their goals and those type of things, but we're looking more like on a quarterly basis. Like instead of the year, we're going to look at quarter. We're going to look at the month. We're going to look at that type of stuff. And we're going to put things in to say, okay, did you do these things over the quarter? And we're going to touch base. The C reps. The problem that managers that I find is that a lot of managers, they focus almost all their efforts on their C's.
Good point.
And what you're doing with that is actually a really bad thing. Because we used to do management coaching, and if you put a thermometer or like say you got your B's in the middle and you got A's over here and your B's over here. If you put a magnet on your A's and your B's and you say, okay, well, I'm sorry, your A's and your C's, and you say, okay, well, which way do you think the B's would lean, right? Well, the obvious answer is, well, they'll probably lean towards your A's, right? Not so much, because let's pan this out. Say you're in a team meeting and manager comes in and drops the new commission plan, and the new commission plan's shit, right? Everybody's mad, whatever. What does the A rep do when they get their new commission plan? Even if it's shit, what do?
They dissect it and find out how they're going to keep on making money.
Exactly. They bounce from the meeting. They go immediately either leave or they get to their desk and they start figuring out how they can make the most money with this thing.
Code.
Right?
Yeah.
What does the C rep do?
Complains and says to everyone else, doesn't this suck, and creates alliances and and it becomes toxic.
So the B rep is sitting there. I want to be like the A rep, but the A rep's gone. Who's sitting next to me bitching? Hey man, you want to go out to grab some lunch and fucking like talk about this shit? Well, yeah, because I'm mad. I don't like this either. So I want to. So guess who gets dragged down? And by putting all of your attention on your C's, what you're telling your B's and your A's is you have to suck in order to get my attention as a manager. So with your C's, you don't fire, like you don't top grade them all and just fire them. That is too draconian. What you do is you set very short-term goals. And I mean very. So, and you don't let them dictate, you dictate. Because what's happening with a C player is C players are typically used to losing. Losing is momentum's a hell of a thing. You know what I mean? And when you lose and you lose and you lose and you lose, you kind of get used to losing. So what you need to do with a C player is you have to get them back on the winning track. So what you do is you set very short. So Derek, hey, can you make 50 dials today? Do you think we can make 50? Just forget about meetings for a second here, Derek. Can you hit the 50 number?
I can do that, John.
Okay, great. End of the day. Derek, did you hit 50? Fucking A, man. Good job, right? Like you did it. Awesome. Tomorrow, Derek, of those 50 calls, do you think you can get through like 5 gatekeepers? Like 5 gatekeepers. Do you think you can try to figure out how to get through 5 gatekeepers? All right, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, how'd we do at the end of the day, Derek? I got through 5. Awesome. Great job, man. All right.
Got it.
Tomorrow, do you think we could try to get 1 meeting? Like, what do you think? Do you think we can go for a
It's
meeting
doable.
today?
It's doable.
Cool. Awesome job. And you just micro celebrate so that you could start building the momentum in the other direction. Otherwise, you need to cut bait and leave. And if they're not coachable, that's when you cut bait, period. Like when somebody is not coachable and they are a C player, fuck off. Right. That's when I won't even blink. You know what I mean? If I tell you to do something and I'm genuinely spending time to figure out and you just kind of go through the motions, that's when I don't even like. And I will say one more piece to this. This is why the empathetic sales leader needs to, fortunately, but kids are too sensitive, right? These days.
Get the words out of my mouth. I didn't want to say it, but
they're fucking pussies. I'm sorry. Like you could probably edit that if you want to, but no, like everybody's got a trophy, that whole shit. Like nobody's like, there's a few people, again, don't want to name names, like who used to work for me, that when I would give them feedback, you would literally physically see them like cringe. And I'd be like, whoa, dude, are you okay? Like, is something wrong with your stomach?
It shut down in some cases and start making faces. And
they'd be like, he'd be like, no, I'm fine. No, this is good. I like feedback. And I'd be like, fuck, dude, like you look like you're about to have a heart attack right now. Like, I'm not going to fire you. I'm literally just giving you direct feedback about something I want you to improve on. And so I think that is why hiring is so important, because you hire on coachability. You hire on coachable. I'd take the kid who's coachable. You know what I used to do when I would hire is I'd bring you in and I'd do my interview with you. And then we'd set up a scenario where it was a cold call scenario, right? And I would say, hey, Derek, what did you sell in the past? Like whatever your current job was. I'd be like, what do you sell?
Better. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And
sell me that.
Right, now, what I'm going to do is I want you to go in the other room and I want you to cold call me at this number. And I want you to, all you're trying to do is get a meeting with me for what you're currently selling. That's it. I don't want you to sell yourself. I want you to just get a meeting and I am your perfect prospect. Okay, go ahead. And so they'd go in the other room, they'd cold call me and we'd go through the role play, whatever. And then I'd bring them in and I'd say, all right, here's my feedback. Good, bad, blah, 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 blah. Now I want you to go back in that room. I want you to cold call me again, but this time you're selling my company. You're selling Thrive Networks at the time. And I am a perfect fit for what you need. I have computers and da-da-da. And again, all you're trying to do is get a meeting. If they went in the room and they applied my coaching and improved, I would usually hire them. Even if their first attempt was horrendous. Like literally, if it was the worst cold call I'd ever heard, right? But then I saw them take what I told them and apply it. And in the other scenario, I'm like, ding, 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 ding.
Demonstrating coachability.
I will take that kid all day long.
Right.
So I think that's why we need to change our lens here as leaders. We need to look for coachability. We need to look for work ethic. We need to look for passion. I can teach skill. I can teach process. I can teach all that stuff. I can't teach drive. I can't teach coachability. I can't teach curiosity. And I can't teach passion.
Well, John, this has been tremendous. I know we're running low on time and you have a lot to take care of. Thank you for taking us through so much. You've, I think, given me gems to stew on for a while. So, and I hope this isn't the last time we have you on the show. I hope to get you back. Where should people look you up and how can they find you?
Yeah, appreciate that. So, we're all over the place. We rebranded recently to Sell Better by JB Sales. So that's our website, sellbetter.xyz.